it's time for another episode of Chip Talks. Today we're going to talk about dementia, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's, so it should be a fun discussion. And again, this is brought to you by Neighborhood Nutrition and Clinic. So Neighborhood Nutrition and Clinic will be opening in early October, the clinical portions of Neighborhood Nutrition and Clinic. And then we will open the nutritional part shortly thereafter and be fully open by January 1st. So there is our plug for Neighborhood Nutrition, and Neighborhood Nutrition is sponsoring Chip Talks. If you'd like to sponsor Chip Talks, feel free to contact me at chip@newpharma.com or give me a call at 918-691-5141. I'm very excited to bring this episode to you today. So we're coming to you from our this is Neighborhood Nutrition. We're still in the process of constructing Neighborhood Nutrition. So you might see some movement behind me, and as Cindy's unpacking boxes and arranging things. We're excited to be here in our new location and here in beautiful Ada, Oklahoma. And so here we go with our first Chip Talks episode from where we are. Just as a little background, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and dementia, but dementia is more a general thing, which we'll talk about a little bit. But all of these diseases really, have to do with, let's say, the state that we put our bodies in, from ignorance, and I don't mean that in any disrespect at all, just from lack of knowledge. We all have done things to ourselves, to our bodies, that are not optimal, let's just say. And why in the world, what I do is I research, right? So I read a lot. So I'm a forensic researcher. So I'm really taking other people's lab work and reading about it. So it's not that, I'm not tucked away in a lab. I mean, I hope to be someday and have a whole group of minions to help, but I'm not doing that right now. So right now I'm reading other people's lab work, but I'm doing that down lines of reason, lines of logic, lines of inquiry, let's say, that are either supporting or denying my model, okay, of human function. So I read a lot of research, and I look at a lot of things, and so I've obviously done that a lot with Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's, but I'm coming to this conclusion that most of these diseases we do to ourselves. So we do it by virtue of our behavior, and we do it by virtue of our diet. And the thing is, the fact that all this stuff is studied, someone knows this. Someone other than me knows all of this stuff. And they know how bad sugar is for us, dietary sugar. They know how bad our behavior is around, how often we eat. It's not really how much we eat that gets us, it's how often we eat, believe it or not. And again, drinking a Coke is eating. Drinking an energy drink is eating. Putting something in your mouth that has more than 50 calories or any kind of dietary sugar is eating, okay? So if you sneak in that cookie between meals, well, sorry, you just ate. But we eat too frequently. And when we do that, we gain weight. Quick story, I know I've told this story 100 times on these Chip Talks, but I'll tell it one more time because I want to illustrate a point just about behavior. Because we're going to, as we get into Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and dementia, we're going to talk about behavior. Believe it or not, there's a lot that you can do if you have someone who's suffering from these diseases just by behavior. No pharma. No, nothing. Behavior and diet. Okay? So, if you're a bear, if you're a big, giant, buff bear, and you come out of your cave in the spring, let's go grizzly bear, but it would apply to any bear. But let's just go grizzly bear, because grizzly bears are big, and we think that they need to eat a lot and all this stuff. So, grizzly bear comes out of his cave in the spring, and he's a hungry bear, or she, and they start eating. Do you know how much time they eat for in the spring and the summer? And this is consistent. They eat for 2 hours, only 2 hours a day. They might eat a jillion tons of salmon during that 2 hours, but that's all they eat. And when you do that, when you eat that infrequently, let's say, or only eat for 2 hours during the day, again, eat as much as you want, you will become buff. You will become lean. You will become muscular if you're kind of working out. But you will absolutely lose weight. There's no way that you can keep weight on you. But you'll become lean though. And so if you look at a bear, by the end of the summer, they're buff, they're lean, they're muscular, right? But that's not the way they go into the winter, Chip. They're fat in the winter. What do? Well, what they do is they change their eating behavior. So they just start eating for 20 hours a day. And when you eat for 20 hours a day, you're going to gain weight because that's the way your body works. And guess what? They gain weight. And so by the fall, you have big, giant fat bears, and they've all stored up all this fat so they can get through the winter. Can we use those principles that apply to us? Yes, absolutely. Again, there you go. Control how often you eat, not how much you eat. And that's, for some reason society wants to tell us, oh yeah, well, you're way better off eating a bunch of little meals that have 100 calories. No, you're not. You'll just get fat. Seriously. You can eat almost 0 calories, and if you just eat really frequently, you're going to gain weight. If you can eat as much as you want 2 hours a day, and you will lose weight, I promise you. And you won't starve. Again, it takes 40 days without food to starve. So anyway, I'm big on fasting, if you can't tell, because it puts your body in a state, because we're going to talk about at the end of this, because it puts your body in a state where it's highly advantageous. Your body is in it goes from, this sort of a sleep mode, which most of us stay in, to this hyper-functioning mode. And we've even got a third gear that we talked about last week. So if you want to learn about that, download last week's podcast. But this one, we're going to talk about Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and dementia. Now, personal story, before Cindy and I got into, let's say, this aspect of healthcare, we had a home care business. So we actually took care of the elderly. And I sold that business in 2014 in Tulsa to a guy who's still running it. He's still doing a great job, and they're much bigger, than they were. I had it pretty big, but he expanded it with insurance and all that. But anyway, used to work with a lot of people who have Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. And so this is a severe disease. Used to deal with a lot of families that had this, and if you're a family member who has someone with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or dementia, it's a tough go. But there's some good news here, and I don't know at what stage we can begin to turn this around, but certainly the tips and techniques here that we'll give at the end. Anybody who's over the age of, let's say, 50 really should start practicing. Okay. And in the coming episodes of Chip Talks, we're going to talk a lot about the sun. So we're going to talk a lot about light, how light works inside of you, and how important that is. But, all these things are great. It doesn't cost you any money, really, to do anything that I'm going to tell you. Again, we can always help things with our supplements. So, I build basically my supplements to support all this science and to help all these things go faster and better. And you can find those at True Medics. So if you're interested in our supplements, truemedics.com, or come into Neighborhood Nutrition and we'll help you. And then we also have a clinic. So again, I try to help people. Again, I'm not a doctor, so don't think that you're coming in to see a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I will give you, advice based on my research. But that seems to work pretty well for folks. And again, in our world, your body is capable of healing itself. We just have to get it going on the right process. Now, why would all these people tell us this junk about disease and all that? That just mystifies me. And it's so obvious, and hopefully it'll become obvious to you guys the more of this stuff that I can give you, the more knowledge that I can give you, really about just kind of how you work and how important diet and behavior is to all that. So let's dive in. Oh, well, my computer screen isn't working here, so let me grab this window real quick. Let's see if I can do this on the fly. Yeah, it's not going to let me. Of course it won't let me. Oh, maybe it will. Maybe it will. Sorry about that. We'll see what this does. Huh. Well, my windows aren't working, so I'll just talk you guys through this. We'll go back to this screen then. So sorry about that, but I can still talk you through it, so you just won't get to see any pictures. But the first thing that I really wanted to clarify is kind of the differences between dementia and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And in particular, dementia is more of a general thing. So dementia would describe symptoms of Alzheimer's. People with Parkinson's can have dementia. So let's just kind of put it that way. So dementia is kind of, it's more of a generalization, and someone might be exhibiting signs of dementia. You might get a determination from a doctor, or basically a prognosis from a doctor if someone has dementia. Well, that might mean pre-Alzheimer's, that might kind of mean, doesn't really mean much with Parkinson's, although you can develop dementia with Parkinson's. But anyway, dementia is kind of more of a general term. So I'm going to talk more specifically about Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Pretty much everything that I say about Alzheimer's would apply to dementia. Dementia is kind of the beginnings of this stuff, let's say. Now, the nice thing is there's certainly causes for this. So there's underlying causes, which we're going to talk about. And then, if we can get to the cause, then we can get to the solution, can't we? The other thing that I want to tell you, certainly if you're, let's say, over the age of 50 and you're listening to this, I'm over the age of 50. I've completely changed my whole physiology, body type, everything, in the last 6 months. And I feel like I can configure it at will. So you're not stuck with where you are. You're not stuck if you have Alzheimer's or dementia or Parkinson's or the beginning stages of that. Your body can rewrite itself. And in my mind and in our world, we're always born with this perfect. We're born with a perfect, kind of template, let's say. And then we start doing things to that template by our diet, by our behavior, and we kind of, find these new normals that are, right now, they're diseased, sadly, but they're, kind of down here away from our really normal or perfect. If we can understand the reasons why we're, being sort of pushed down here, we can begin to trend back up to that perfect. And I see this happen every day, my friends. So don't think that is just a load of hooey. This is happening daily in our world. So and it's something that I don't even talk about enough because I kind of just take it for granted that everybody understands it. But your body has a perfect, and again, if we can just kind of give you the right resources, take you to the right mechanic, let's say, give you the right resources, then your body will, get back to that new, bright, shiny vehicle, potentially, that you're perfect, let's say, or trending toward your perfect. I don't know that any of us can ever get back to kind of the way God's intention for us, but we certainly can trend back that way, okay? So that's the cool thing. So anyway, I just wanted to clear that up about dementia. I'm going to probably allude to it, but I'm not going to talk about it a lot. So what's the difference between Alzheimer's and Parkinson's? A lot of people know. Well, again, I'll read just something from Google here, but you guys can look up, what's the difference. But Alzheimer's mainly affects language and memory at the outset. So language and memory with Alzheimer's. Parkinson's affects problem solving, speed of thinking, memory, and mood. So Parkinson's generally is more physical, so you'll see some tremors, things like that. But again, memory is going to be both of them. So if someone's having memory issues, it could be both and is going to require a little bit more investigation. The nice thing about both of these diseases is the underlying causes are pretty much the same. And sorry about that, we'll put the phone on silent. The underlying causes are pretty much the same, and how you really address the underlying causes are pretty much the same for both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Now, if you go to your physician, they're going to categorize you different because the insurance codes are different between Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and they're going to tell you, it's completely different things. Wow, we've got quite a bit of police activity going on by the highway running by our office. So we just had a couple of very fast-moving police cars drive by. So, okay. So that's kind of, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are kind of the same thing, although they manifest with different symptoms. Let's just say it that way. So the underlying cause, probably the same, but different symptoms. So what is that underlying cause? Well, it's something called amyloids, okay? So beta amyloids you might have heard of, or amyloids. But what amyloids are kind of, they're good proteins, but if you express too much of them, they can become bad. They can gum up your neurology. They can form plaques. And it's looking like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are both caused by this beta amyloid plaquing, okay? So what causes the beta amyloid plaquing? What causes basically dysregulation in neurons where they're, over manufacturing this protein called beta amyloid? Well, it turns out that it's bacteria. It turns out that there are things called, and I'll post these studies since I can't show my screen for some reason right now. But I'll post these studies in the follow-up so you guys can kind of get in here and see and look at what I'm looking at. But beta amyloids are, if someone has, let's say, gingivitis, believe it or not, and this article that I have pulled up right now is a Nature article, so this isn't like, a gee whiz woohoo article out of Eastern Mongolia. This is Nature, okay? So, and if you have gingivitis, and the name of this is, are infections seeding some cases of Alzheimer's disease? And the same would go for Parkinson's. But it turns out that they've looked at herpes-type viruses, and by the way, 95% of us have Epstein-Barr virus, 95%, okay? And that is a herpes-type virus. So it is also called mononucleosis. So remember back when you were a kid, the kissing disease? Well, they renamed it. So now it's called Epstein-Barr disease. And guess what? You have it, or 95% of you have it. So you are susceptible to Alzheimer's just by virtue of your exposure to Epstein-Barr is what I'm telling you. But HIV viruses and gingivitis, interestingly, are associated with this beta amyloid dysregulation, which certainly could cause Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. There's also a couple of other bacteria, but again, let's see, I know what they said here, and I'll just read you this thing. Oh, I was just going to read you this statement from the paper, but I'll just tell you. But basically what it says is that they have linked this to different types of, kind of dysregulated bacteria, these amyloid problems. And it doesn't have to be gingivitis, and it doesn't have to be herpes, that it could be other things. So again, heads up. Now, the other thing that's interesting, I found another study as I sort of began to look at this and found, these bacteria that are associated directly with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Desolvibrio bacteria is directly associated with Parkinson's disease. And again, this bacteria is something that a lot of, you see this a lot really in autism, which is interesting. And a lot of this stuff is kind of all related. It's all neurocognitive, isn't it? But these bacteria, again, will cause basically these dysregulations in our body. And in this case, they're causing overproduction of beta amyloid, which can cause plaque and which may be the underlying cause of Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's, okay? So this is actually good news. This is the kind of things that I look for when I'm researching a disease state, or I'm looking at ways that underlying causes, let's say, for a disease state. I'm always looking for bacteria. I'm looking for causes, right? And most of the time I find a bacterial cause, which is encouraging because it means that we can attack a lot of these things by attacking the bacteria that are causing them instead of trying to treat the symptoms like we do in pharma. So here's and again, what I'm looking at now is a large study that links gingivitis with dementia, okay? So again, back to these same bacteria, and gingivitis is caused by bacteria, but that might be causing dementia, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. And it's not just gingivitis, it could be other bacteria, but all of these, there are certain bacteria, let's say, that are highly correlated to Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's, which is a lot of smoke, not necessarily the reason for them, okay? But it gives us a vector. It gives us a, potentially underlying cause that we can go attack with things. Now, the great thing, this is a secret. I'll tell you guys a secret that I know. Vitamin D is what helps your body kill bacteria, and what helps your body kill bacteria that's too much. So a little bit of gingivitis might not be too bad. I mean, it's probably going to happen, but a lot of gingivitis might be bad. And I'm just saying that. I'm not a dentist or an orthodontist or anything. It's probably any is bad, but your body's ability to control and manage these bacterial blooms and kill them off is super important. Well, guess how we do that? The sun, and we do that with vitamin D. Okay, now real quick how vitamin D works, because a lot of people don't know this. Cholesterol, actually from cholesterol, you make pre-vitamin D. You make a lot of stuff from cholesterol, by the way. Cholesterol is super important. We all think of cholesterol bad. No. Cholesterol is good. Ask any cell if he likes cholesterol, and he will say, yes, I have to have cholesterol to build and proliferate myself. So cholesterol is super important to our body, and vitamin D comes from cholesterol. But there's a reaction in the middle that requires the sun. So you have to basically have direct sunlight to be able to produce vitamin D. By the way, if you live north of Oklahoma, you don't produce any vitamin D. None. Zero, zip, nilch, nada, just because of sun angle. So if you're up in Tulsa, if you're north of Tulsa, if you're up in, let's say, Enid, if you're up in, Ponca City, you need to listen to this about vitamin D, and we'll be doing some special segments on vitamin D, but vitamin D is what helps our bodies kill bacteria. So if you have gingivitis, and you probably got Epstein-Barr too, because 95% of us do, and you don't get in the sun enough, you're susceptible to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia. Yes, that is true. Now, what is it in vitamin D that helps with bacteria? There's actually a lot of things, but if you want to research something, there's something called defensin, and you only produce defensin really in this vitamin D reaction. There's another one called cathelicidin, and it's important too, but the defensin is really, it's an easy one to research. It's kind of a fun one to look up. So look up diseases and bacteria and how they respond to defensin, and you're going to learn a big aspect of our body and how we defend ourselves that probably most of us don't even do or take advantage of right now because we don't get in the sun enough, and we live north of Oklahoma, a lot of us. Well, I don't. I live south, and I run around with my shirt off all the time in order to get the sun. Okay, so defensin. So this defensin stuff that comes from vitamin D, well, I just pulled up a study, and it's talking about, the title of the study, antimicrobial defensins as multi-target inhibitors against amyloid formation and microbial infection. So defensins help with amyloid formation, which looks to be the underlying cause of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So maybe we just need to get in the sun more, huh? I wish it was that simple, but that's what it's looking like, okay? So it's looking like, again, here's an interesting thing. So do this at home, because I can't show you this, dang it, but we'll get all this worked out for the next one. But if you're at home, just pull up the old Google machine and type in these 4 words. Vitamin, space, D, I guess D isn't really a word, but we'll count him as a word. space amyloid, AMYLOID, and then space plaques. And what you're going to find is a whole bunch of research on vitamin D and amyloids, vitamin D and plaque formation with amyloids, but basically how vitamin D helps you fight against amyloids, the buildup of amyloids and amyloid plaque. The other thing that helps is omega-3, because omega-3 has DHA and EPA, which kind of help your brain go better. But vitamin D, no question, helps you with your Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. It would help the causes of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So again, you can think of it this way. We get dysregulated, and in our neurons, in our brains, we start producing too much beta amyloid. When we do that, it gums up the works. The beta amyloid forms plaque and gets in between neurons, so our neurons can't fire properly, and we've got just, there's stuff gumming up the works. Well, guess what? Vitamin D clears the plaque. Vitamin D keeps us from basically building the plaque and building too much amyloid B. It helps us regulate, I guess is the best way to say it, amyloid B in the proper way. Okay, so if you're north of Oklahoma and you don't get in the sun at all, what do? Well, right now you can supplement with vitamin D, but again, it's better to have your body make it. And again, that's a process that happens with the sun. So are there ways to duplicate that process? Yes. And I will say that we will have products pretty soon through a company called New Analytics, which will address this problem. And then this is, it seems like a difficult problem to solve, but it's really not. And so we'll have some products pretty soon that will help. Literally, it'll be a light you shine on yourself for 30 minutes probably, something like that. But anyway, we'll have a product pretty soon that addresses the vitamin D deficiency, and we'll have documented proof and evidence that it works. So you can do this yourself. Again, and if you're trying to stimulate vitamin D, let me give you some tips. Okay, so take some vitamin B first, called riboflavin. Riboflavin will just help you absorb light from the sun, okay? As will heme and blood, as will really all the stuff, all your cofactors of life really sing when they get in the sun. So anything, amino acids, all of those things get energized and charged by the sun. But it only works, again, if you're in the right latitudes. And so if you're above Oklahoma, you're too far north to really get a lot of stimulation from the sun. So you have to be south of Oklahoma, or you have to supplement. So if you're north of Oklahoma, you're going to have to take some vitamin D supplements. If you're south of North Oklahoma, so if you're in Oklahoma or south of Oklahoma, then you can just get out in the sun, okay? But you have to get out in the sun between, let's say, 10 and 2 every day. Try to get out in the sun for more than 15 minutes, so 15 to 30 minutes. It's better if you haven't eaten for 5 hours when you get in the sun, if you're in something called a fasted state. So if you don't eat breakfast, try to get in the sun, between 10 and 2. And believe it or not, just that simple thing is going to help a lot with dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's symptoms, okay? Because you're going to begin to stimulate that vitamin D will begin to break down those beta amyloid plaques that are the underlying causes of the dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. So it's as easy as that, isn't it? There's certainly a lot that you can do to support this with diet. Again, glucose is horrible. And what I mean by that is not, we're supposed to eat carbohydrates, okay? But carbohydrates from plants, and carbohydrates have sugars in them, but they're these long molecule sugars that it takes your body work to break down. And then you use that as glucose, and you should use that, we use that sparingly. We need to run on fats, right? So glucose is kind of there in emergency situations. Every cell will run on glucose, but we really need to be running on fats. So if I give you like dietary sugar, like a single molecule of sugar, your body's just going to immediately go, whoa, yummy, gimme, gimme, because every cell inside of you will run on that glucose. It's like just the default. And if it's a single molecule, your body doesn't have to work at all to break it down. But that's not how we should gain energy, because when we do, our systems suffer. It's too easy, let's say. We don't go through any stress. There's no work for our cells to do. They get lazy. They go to sleep. We stop expressing neuroreceptors. Genes turn off, okay? So stop eating dietary sugar, or limit your amount of dietary sugar greatly. I still eat some dietary sugar, but my wife and I are trying to move to more like date sugars and, more natural sugars that are more complex, that take more work for our body to break down, and they don't just, kind of immediately get in your bloodstream. So anyway, we'll leave it there. So again, if you do have Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or dementia, or love someone who does, dietary sugars, begin to cut that out. Get out in the sun between 10 and 2 if you live south in Oklahoma or south of. See you guys. Thank you. It's always a joy doing these. Again, if you have suggestions for topics, feel free to offer them up. I think next week we're going to do evolution, which should be a fun one. We're going to throw some darts at Mr. Darwin. If you're a Christian, you're going to love this one, because we're going to talk a lot about God, really, as we do in all these. God is great, God is good, and God has given us our food, which it turns out is our medicine, as long as we bring it back to nature, because that's where the cures are. See you.